Hey everyone, this is the rewriter writing in. I've taken quite a long absence from this channel, but the Acolyte is so bad that it's pulled me out from the dormant shadows and forced me to rewrite it. From the bland characters to the inconsistent writing and the flimsy motivations to the total retcon of fundamental basics of Star Wars lore, this show feels like an insult to the intelligence of anyone watching it and a slap in the face to the fans. I'm tired of politically and socially driven Star Wars content, and I long for the days where great storytelling and interesting characters were the driving motivation behind creating the movies and the shows that inhabited this world. I miss the old Star Wars, and I know all of you do too. Now, this show seems to be the straw that's breaking the camel's back for the majority of the fans out there, even the enjoyers of Disney's butchering of Star Wars, which I find to be a very positive thing. We need true pushback to show Disney that we're tired of their crappy characters and their lazy writing. But with all this being said, I think that the idea of the Acolyte is an interesting one if done correctly. So I'm here to take a swing at that. I hope that you enjoy my rewrite. I had a good time writing it. I hope that you'll have a good time listening to it. But with this intro out of the way, let's dive into the rewritten story of the Acolyte. The remote planet Weta, a bastion for the wearied intergalactic traveler, was bathed in the warmth of the planet's young star. The even more remote village that the planet housed looked serene and calm from a distance. Isolated neatly on a cliffside overlooking vast seas, every hyperspace prospector dreamed of visiting this humble, quiet corner of space for rest and some of the best meals the galaxy had to offer. Had this been 10 years prior, all these statements would have been true. But once the planet was claimed by the savage pirate faction known as the Nihil, this beloved haven became a den for all manner of murderers and thieves to consort and conspire. Master Indara, a member of the Jedi Council, a body of 12 of the most powerful Jedi Masters governing the Jedi Order, received secret word of the mysterious abduction of her former Padawan, the Jedi Knight Torben. The rumor was that he had been taken to Weta, the desolate planet far into the outer rim. Leaving Coruscant under the camouflage of night, she left without the Council's knowledge or approval, for she feared their typical answer, that they must wait until the possibility of a peaceful negotiation from the opposing party could be made. If there was one thing Indara hated about being on that council, was having to sit around all day listening to petty squabbles and philosophical debates. She took her position on the Jedi Council with honor, but longed for the days where she was free to make her own judgment calls. On the matter of this issue, such a judgment call must be made in order to procure the lost. Making the journey in only a matter of days, she arrived at the shambles that it had become. A once lively, bustling hub of vendors and families with small children playing in the narrow passageways had become a ghost town, with obvious signs of battle tainting the town, with blaster burns along walls and torn down houses and shops. A few homeless people littered the ravaged streets, muttering under their breath in shock that an actual Jedi was there. As Indara paced through the streets, her immaculate tan and brown robes were a striking difference to the muck around her, making her stand out like a sore thumb. But what did that matter? She wanted every thug and villain to know she was coming. She arrived at a cantina located at the tip of the cliffside. When she walked in, all eyes were fastened on her. The only noise came from a jukebox-looking device that played the signature music of the Nihil, oppressive and head-pounding wreck punk. She approached the bartender, a strange creature with eyes on the side of its head and a nose on its forehead, complete with a beard that draped below its neck. He wore simple robes, not much better than the rags the destitute had beyond the walls of the cantina. She held a hollow projector above the counter. "I'm looking for this Jedi. Have you seen him?" Indara asked indignantly as the faded blue display of Torben's head and shoulders spun on the device. The creature was wiping the countertop down as he gave it a passing glance for a mere moment. He replied, "Afraid not. As you can see, this individual is not our typical company." The bartender spoke part truth. Looking around revealed a shabby group of individuals of all species, garbed in stolen and mismatched clothing and armor, and most of them wearing faded brown helmets that had seen their fair share of combat. Humans rarely ranked among the Nihil. Those who did were typically servants. But Indara was a Jedi master, easily sensing the lie that gripped his words. "Let's try that again," she said sternly, partly pulling back her robe to reveal the lightsaber hilt that hung from her belt. "That ain't very Jedi-like of you to be threatening an unarmed civilian. Just tell me what I need to know, and I'll be on my way." "You're lost, human. Just turn around and go," were his last words as his severed head hit the floor. The glow of her green lightsaber illuminated the seedy cantina as tables were pushed over and blasters were equipped. A hail of laser fire raced towards her as she stood ready, deflecting them all with ease. A powerful force blast sent the table they used as cover smashing them against the wall. A few of the mercenaries rushed her with blades and staves, so she deactivated her lightsaber, reattaching it to her belt. A large pirate swung at her, but her agility far exceeded theirs as she ducked under the horizontal swing and, spinning, swept him off his feet with a sweep kick. He fell hard to the ground, and before he could get up, she punched his face with so much force that it thrust it through the wood flooring. Two more came erratically swinging at her, which she sidestepped, landing counter punches to their arms that caused them to drop their weapons to the ground, before finishing both of them off with rapid punches to the chest and head. More thugs with blasters started to pour in from outside. Using her heightened speed, she dodge rolled to avoid the line of fire and sprinted at their row, igniting her saber and slicing each in half. Charred body parts flopped to the ground as she turned back towards the cantina as she heard heavy breathing and panting coming from behind a downed table. She used the force to lift it out of the way, tossing it behind her. A scrawny Nihil Twi'lek was frozen as she dropped her puny spiked bat. Indara deactivated her saber. "Just tell me where to find him." All the Twi'lek could do was shakily point her finger towards the back door. "Thank you. Now leave this life behind." Still shaking, she scurried off as Indara walked to the door. It was locked, but this wasn't a problem for her, as her lightsaber could open most things. Cutting along the frame, the heavy metal door fell backward with a thud as she walked through the decrepit corridor. She sensed Torben, the light of a Jedi, but she also sensed great darkness. Using her saber's light to guide her path, she found him inside a cell, protected by an impenetrable laser wall. He was lying on the ground, covered in cuts and bruises, with ripped-up robes. A voice, twisted and obstructed by a helmet or mask of some kind, rang out behind her. "Master Indara, you've defied the will of the Council. Is this one boy worth slaughtering a dozen men for?" Quickly turning around, Indara saw nothing but darkness. "Who are you? Why take him? Isn't it obvious? Aren't you standing here, right where I want you?" Waving her lightsaber around to bring light to the room, Indara yelled out, "What do you want with me? Why bring him into this? It's cowardly." "Your pride seems to always get the best of you. Do whatever you'd like, run into any situation head first. It will always turn out good. That's what you tell yourself, don't you?" That arrogance seemed to rub off on your former Padawan here. He couldn't help himself but swing into action like a hero in a fairy tale. I don't know who you think you are, but I don't scare easily. Drop the theatrics, let the night go and face me. This is your last warning. Indara began to fume. You and all your Jedi ilk are the same. Arrogant fools. You claim to be peacekeepers, yet you slaughter those who oppose you. You claim to save lives, yet you left me for dead. The voice solidified into a figure cloaked in shadow that appeared in Torben's cell, pulling him up by the hair. Torben's face was beaten almost beyond recognition, but the familiar blue of his eyes still gleamed. Indara's grip around her saber grew tighter, and the figure pulled out a long, thin blade, holding the edge to his neck. Indara then summoned the strength of the Force, unleashing a push that would send 10 men flying backward. But the figure held out an arm, disarming the blast. This was no mere assassin. All Indara could do was watch in horror as the figure slit Torben's throat and the life drained out of him. Her fury burned hot as she yelled in anguish when suddenly the energy closing off the cell from the rest of the room shut down. The figure sprinted at her, launching several darts in her direction that she cut down with ease. Emerging from the shadows, the figure sprinted at her. She could finally see her assailant. Her body shape was that of a woman, clad in silver and black durasteel armor. She had a belt that contained an array of tools and a mask which concealed her face, along with a hood and cape. Indara attempted to read her mind, but the mental fortitude from her was unlike any she had encountered before, and she could get no read. Indara carefully struck at the assassin, whose agility allowed her to gracefully dodge each attack. The assassin had kept the sword in its sheath as she threw her fists at Indara. A couple strikes connected. Indara's nose spilled out hot blood. Indara unleashed a flurry of attacks with unbelievable speed, but the assassin dodged every one and force pushed her against the stone and metal wall. Anticipating a forward slash intending to cut her in half, the assassin ran up the wall and leaping off it landed a kick to the side of Indara's head, causing her to stumble backward. Wiping the blood forming at the ends of her lips, Indara asked, "Who trained you? Whose apprentice are you? The Sith are extinct. You and your master will be eradicated." "I am an Acolyte of the Force." Force pulling a couple daggers that were strung on her belt, the Acolyte unleashed her own flurry of slashes, some that cut through Indara's robes. But her lightsaber was far more powerful, as when she parried the rest of the attacks, the daggers melted out of her hands. Indara took a step back, readying her saber for a wide slash that would cut her assailant in half, and swung. In that time, she pulled out her blade and clashed with the saber, causing it to malfunction and retract back into the hilt. Indara, in shock, stared with eyes wide open at her malfunctioning saber for just a second too long, as the silent blade was thrust through her chest. Gasping for air, the strength left her legs as she slumped to the ground. Fear washed over her. Her skin had become ghostly pale and sweat poured down her face. The assassin took a knee next to Indara as she squirmed. "Feel helpless? Afraid? Good. Now you get it." The Acolyte ripped the bloody edge of the blade out of Indara's chest and used her Jedi robes to wipe it clean. "You took everything from me. You're no hero. You left me to die. Now, I leave you to die, having taken everything from you." Indara was a bloody mess on the floor, along with her fallen Jedi Knight, Torben. Extended periods of deep space travel always made Osha feel a bit sick, but she never let Master Soul know. However, a part of her was aware that he most likely sensed this and chose to say nothing. Osha felt fortunate to have Soul as a master. Some of the other masters were more rigid than him, demanding perfection with minuscule room for error. He was always patient and kind. He had become more of a father figure than an instructor, which is how she had always viewed masters and their Padawans. Her close friend Yord's master, Karth, a Quarren Jedi, opened her eyes to the fantasy that was. Master Karth is a skilled warrior and fiercely dedicated to the Order, but his methods of instruction are far more brutal than Master Sol has ever been towards her. And yet she felt Yord and her to be equals in combat and force-wielding capabilities, despite the complete opposite style of training. But it was never her place to air these grievances, however much they existed. Their cruiser had begun its descent into the planet Kofar's atmosphere when Sol debriefed her. 6 months ago, Master Kelnaka was stationed here to maintain Jedi presence in the Outer Rim territories. A small colony lives just outside the main jungle that stretches the length of the planet. Multiple locals confirmed that he took his residence somewhere in that jungle, but would see him often. However, he hasn't been sighted in over a month now, leaving the small community worried. The Jedi Council has tasked us with retrieving him and bringing him back to Coruscant. "I'm ready, Master," Osha replied, looking out the window to see a thick morning haze covering the lush greenery that engulfed the planet. It was beautiful, but mysterious. Kofar is not a friendly planet. The wildlife has been known to be very hostile. Be on your guard at all times, Master Sol cautioned her. Though Master Sol was kind, this did not mean that he was weak. He was considered one of the most skilled fighters, taught by Master Indara herself, as well as being one of the most attuned to the Force, making him the foremost tracker in all missing Jedi cases. But something else bothered Osha, a gnawing pit deep in her stomach, but she couldn't put her finger on it. It was comparable to uneasiness or dread, but why? They had been on countless rescue missions, on planets just as dangerous as this, and yet she sensed something was off. This wasn't your typical anxiety, it was something looming, spine-tingling. Osha chalked it up to the space travel, nothing more, as the ship landed on a small platform next to the colony. The village was humble, a small community of farmers and hunters. Jedi presence was rare in these parts of the galaxy, and so the two of them drew quite a bit of attention as they left their starship and entered the village. Master Sol approached a group of farmers and began questioning them, while Osha walked up to a little girl playing with her doll, who looked up in awe. An actual Jedi wanted to talk to her. "Hi, I'm Osha. I really like your village. It's cozy. What's your name?" After a moment's hesitation, she shyly answered, "Della. My name's Della." Osha bent down next to her. "That's a lovely name, Della. Nice to meet you. And who might your friend be?" she asked, pointing to the doll. "This is Kay," she replied, stroking its head back and forth. Osha reached out and shook the doll's hand in greeting. Della chuckled a little bit, which made Osha smile. "And where did you get your friend?" A tinge of sadness touched Della's face as she answered, "From my other friend, the Wookiee Jedi. I miss him. He was friendly and so soft, I loved hugging him. Are you here to look for him?" "Yes, we want to find him too. Do you know where he might be?" "I heard him cry out one night as I was in bed, and then I never saw him again. He's out there, in the Forbidden Land," she somberly stated as she pointed to the planet-wide forest that engulfed them. "Thank you, Della. That was helpful. He's going to be okay, I promise." Della's eyes streamed with tears as she hugged Osha. Osha teared up too. Standing back up, she wiped her tears as she came back to Master Sol. "Did they have any idea where he might have gone, Master?" "They said he started out interacting with their colony a few times a week, mostly with the children who loved to play with him. But over the weeks his appearances became less and less. One of the locals noticed a bright light descending deep into the jungle one night. After that point they never saw him again. One of the children told me that she heard a scream coming from the forest one night. Those events have to connect." My thoughts exactly, my Padawan. Whatever came down to the planet must have Kelnaka. We must head for the jungle." Osha looked back to see the child clutching at her doll, which strengthened her determination to find Master Kelnaka. Entering the gloom of the forest unsettled Osha, as even taking only a few steps through the trees made the planet seem dark, like perpetual night. The village was nowhere in sight. Bugs of all kinds slithered and scattered away from each step they took, and the ambient noises of the forest sounded as though they were closing in on them. Osha noticed many trees having a black glob clinging to them, but didn't investigate any further than she felt she needed to. The sooner they were out of this jungle, the better. A part of her felt a sense of resentment towards the council for having to submit any Jedi to this lonely and foreboding land. She was deep in thought. She bumped into her master, who was bent over looking at the ground. "Forgive me, master, my thoughts take me away." Soul continued anyway. "Look at the grass and branches. They're smashed and flung outside of this circle." Osha looked, but clearly wasn't following, as Soul explained. "It's only in this specific area, and look at the mud around the grass. It's dried into dirt." Finally picking up what Soul was putting down, she answered, "A craft landed here. The flame from the thrusters caused the mud to scorch into dirt, and the grass seemed to be smashed or ripped away from the landing zone." "Correct, Osha. Someone knew Kelnaka was here." Master Soul pushed forward as Osha followed close behind. Leaves fell and branches swayed as Osha looked up to the ceiling of leaves that shrouded them. Animals of some kind were flying quickly above them. Then Master Soul stopped again, observing a mark on a tree. "What do you see, Master?" "An echo, my Padawan." Touching the slash mark, Soul could see a blue silhouette in the form of a ghost battling an unknown enemy. Shouts are heard as the assailant's weapon strikes into the tree. Then the scene disappears. "Is it a lightsaber slash?" Osha questioned as she observed it. "No, but a blade arguably as strong as a lightsaber." "There was a confrontation. It leads this way." He pressed forward through the fog as Osha followed closely behind him, noticing more slashes along the trees. Some of them were burns, definitely a lightsaber. Master Kelnaka was battling someone, but this far into the Outer Rim territories on a planet barely inhabited by colonized life? It didn't make sense. Then Osha noticed the smoke rising above the trees and pointed it out to her master. They rushed to get in closer, stumbling upon a hut that had been burned to a crisp. Smoke still lingered from it. Master Kelnaka's hut? Who would do this? Before Soul could answer, a loud Wookiee cry belted out, unsettling the forest around them. The animals above the trees revealed themselves to be the insects that wrapped themselves around the trees. Dozens of them began swarming around Soul and Osha. 3 of them dive-bombed towards them as they both ignited their blue-bladed sabers, cutting the insects in half. More of them swooped in as Soul force-gripped one of them and sent it flying into a tree, crushing it. Osha blocked a swing from one of their claws and sliced the claw in half before plunging her saber through its torso. More of them kept pouring in as Soul and Osha made their way through the horde with their force abilities and their sabers, making short work of them. Just as they cleared out the flying beetles, a shaggy, fur-covered beast with twisted horns, red eyes, and claws as long as the length of their sabers rushed towards them, grappling Soul to the ground as it tried to bite his head off. Osha leapt onto the creature's back, stabbing it repeatedly to shake it off her master. It worked, but in so doing, it ripped her from off of it and flung her into a tree. She used a force push to significantly decrease her momentum as she collided with the tree. She was still in pain, but at least her spine was still intact. She got back up, force pulling her saber towards her as she ran back into the fight. Soul was sliding through its legs, slicing at them as the beast growled in pain. Osha was aiming for the claws, dismembering them one by one as the beast violently thrashed at her. Soul threw his lightsaber at the beast's face, but it batted the saber away into the grass behind it. He then force-gripped its arm and shoved it hard into a tree next to it, causing it to snap with a crunch. It howled as it clutched at its arm and slumped down. Osha ran with her saber drawn to finish the beast off. "Stop, Osha, it has been defeated. We do not kill when we do not have to." Soul yelled these instructions that stopped her in her tracks. She so badly wanted to end this monster that tried to kill them, but she recognized the wisdom of his words. "Yes, master," she admitted as she deactivated her saber. The beast cried in pain as it sauntered off back into the gloom of the forest. Sol pulled his lightsaber back to him and clipped it on back to his belt. "Come, Osha." Kalnaka's scream came from this direction. He pointed towards the north of the burned-out hut. Running through the thick grass and muddy pools of rainwater, they reached the Wookiee Jedi. He was almost unrecognizable. His normally thick coat of hair and fur was frayed and muddy, with chunks ripped out. He had cuts all over his body, and his robes had been torn to shreds. He was squirming on the ground erratically, and when they approached him, he reeled back in fear. His eyes were bloodshot, darting between them rapidly. His hands were shaking as he gripped his lightsaber with both of them. "Master Kalnaka, what happened here? What happened to you? Tell us," Master Sol shouted. The Wookiee shouted in its native tongue that Osha still hadn't learned yet. "What do you mean, a great darkness? Help us to understand," he shouted back in response. It howled again as Osha could see the Jedi visibly shaking. What person or thing could have caused a Jedi Master to be in such disarray? Her heart broke for him. It was clear that Kalnaka was speaking in riddles, as Sol could not discern what he was saying. Sol tried to calm him down, but it wasn't working as Kalnaka leapt to his feet, discharging his lightsaber. "Put the saber down, Kalnaka. You're not in your right mind. Come with us. We're going to take you back to Coruscant. You'll be safe there." Sol did his best to reassure the once wise, passive Jedi Master, but there was no more sanity left in Kalnaka, as he shouted one last time and thrust his saber through his chest. Sol and Osha screamed as they ran towards the Jedi, who had already succumbed to his wound. They both wept over their fallen brother. For Sol, he was a companion, a friend. For Osha, he was a teacher who always made her feel welcome among the Jedi. Sol lifted his friend, holding him in both of his arms, as they somberly walked through the gloomy forest and out into the village. The villagers wept around them as they watched their protector lying dead in the Jedi Master's arms. A young voice cried out from among the crowd, "You promised that he was going to be okay. You're a liar. I hate you." Della's weeping eyes connected with Osha, who had to look away or she would lose all composure. Once they arrived back at the ship, a protocol droid took the body away to the med bay as Master Sol went to the holoprojector chamber, opening a communication line with the Jedi Council. Standing in the middle of the room, Sol saw the empty chairs around him begin to fill with the holograms of the council members. "Master Sol, have you any news regarding Master Kalnaka?" Master Vernestra asked. Master Kalnaka was not in his right mind when we found him deep in the forest. He was muttering about a great darkness that had clouded his mind. He was out of control and eventually took his own life. "Unsettling and depressing news this is," Master Yoda uttered, reflecting on the Jedi that had been his friend for many years. "And what of this great darkness that he spoke of? Do you understand what this is?" Master Plo Koon questioned. "I'm afraid at this moment I do not have an answer for you." Master Sol bowed his head down. Master Plo Koon continued, "As Master Yoda said, this is very disturbing, and it seemingly is not at an end. Master Indara has been missing for a week now without a trace. Master Sol, we know that you and your Padawan have been away from the temple for some time, but it is of the utmost importance that you find her. News of a member of the Jedi Council missing will no doubt cause a panic that we do not want. Indara was Master Sol's best friend growing up in the Jedi Academy, and with her missing, that explained the pit in his stomach that had been growing for days. You have my word that I will find her," Sol replied. "May the Force be with you, Master Sol," Master Vernestra stated as the holograms faded. The council chamber in the Jedi Temple was stirring with conversation as the doors slid open. A young Padawan, Jeki Lon, stood timidly. "Padawan learner, what are you doing in our chamber and away from class?" asked the Quirmian Jedi Master Yariel. "I know where Master Indara is." The thin blade inside its sheath was carefully placed on a stand inside the bleak cave that acted as the headquarters for the Acolyte. All that furnished the cave was a small hollow projector detailing a galaxy map, a thin mat for bedding, and a small armory to store her armor and weapons. She removed her hood and cape but left her mask on. Seating herself on the ground, she crossed her legs and held her hands out in front of her in a meditative pose. She breathed in and out, slowly and methodically, quietly whispering to herself, "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me." "You have done well, my child," a deep, ethereal voice in her mind answered. "My revenge brings you into balance, a win on both fronts," she spoke, as though a master were in front of her, but she was alone. "You have progressed well, becoming more formidable than any before you. Not all are capable of learning directly from me. I am one with you, and you are with me," she responded in subservient fashion, bowing her head. "You should have never been born. I regret you," an intrusive voice echoed in her mind. "The voices that swirl in your mind, they cause you rage, do they not?" "Yes, divine force," she painfully replied. "I'd kill you myself, I would," the voice continued to mock. "Use this rage, your hate, use it to destroy those who cause you harm. Or cower away, be weak, and it will destroy you. My rage guides my every action, divine force. I will yield it for your use." In her mind, a fire broke out, the cleansing blaze that melted away the voices that plagued her day in and day out. Breathing in and out one last time, she ended her meditation, walking over to the hollow projector showing the Outer Rim territories. Poking at the hologram of Weda, the planet's typical faded blue coating became red. The holographic head of Master Indara flashed also to red. Collapsing the map in, she focused on another sector to the right of where the planet Weda was and zoomed in on the planet Olega. She turned off the holograms of her other targets except for her next one, Master Jorah Mali. This Jedi Master was stationed at the fledgling Jedi Temple that had been established there mere months prior. The Jedi were expanding their reach, spreading themselves too thin. This was the perfect time to strike. Turning everything off, she walked into the obscuring shadow, where she took her armor off, then her mask, and laid down on the thin mat. "Speak, child, where is Master Indara?" asked the Mon Calamari Master Ephru. "Yes, Master Ephru. Well, last week, I was in the archives room, trying to find the texts that spoke about lightsaber combat forms for an assignment from Master Greatstorm. Master Indara was there, and so I asked her for help. She began helping me find the right texts, but then she was approached by Padawan Toril. She asked to speak in private, but they only walked a few steps away, so I overheard her saying that Knight Torben had been abducted and brought to the planet Weda. That's all I heard." "And where did Padawan Toril get this information from?" asked Master Yariel. "I don't know. I'm sorry, Master Yariel," she responded, nervously picking at the dead skin around her fingers. "Fear do not have. The right thing you are doing, informing us," Master Yoda reassured her. "Padawan, where is Toril?" Master Vernestra inquired. Gulping, she responded, "Padawan Toril has been in our chambers for several days. She says that she's afflicted with an illness, that she needs just time and space. But I am getting worried. I asked Master Greatstorm about what to do, and he instructed me to speak with you all." Master Greatstorm acted prudently. "I will go speak with her. Thank you for this information, Padawan Jeki." Master Vernestra stood, putting her hand on Jeki as they both walked out of the chamber. Making their way through the temple, she felt a little safer with Vernestra by her side. The door to Padawan Toril's room was locked shut, just as it had been for several days now. Knocking loudly, Master Vernestra said, "Padawan Toril, this is Master Vernestra. You need to open this door. We need to talk." No reply. Then again, she demanded for the door to be opened. Nothing. Are you sure she's in there? Could she be in class? No, Master Vernestra, we're in the same classes, and I haven't seen her in days. Nodding her head in approval, Master Vernestra motioned for her to stand back. Then, raising one arm, she ripped the metal sliding door out and thrust it to the side. A foul stench wafted into the hallway from inside her room. Padawan Jeki gagged before putting her robe up to her nose. Vernestra knew this smell, but needed to see the proof herself, and took a few steps inside. The room was a mess, with robes and hollow tablets lining the floors, and right in the middle was Padawan Toril, slumped down on the ground, with her lightsaber still in her hand and a hole through her chest. Her flesh had been rotting for days now. Padawan Jeki, get the temple guards immediately, Vernestra commanded her. Fear had painted itself onto the child's face as she stumbled away. Master Vernestra's thoughts were taking her through several possibilities to search for a reason as the temple guards arrived, robed in their golden and cream-colored robes and masked in expressionless helmets of the same color. Take the body to the morgue for examination and seal off the room for the time being. We don't need any students stumbling in here. They nodded in understanding and covered the body before removing it. Vernestra made her way over to the crying Padawan, embracing her. Why would she do this? I don't understand. Padawan Jeki's devastation even made Master Vernestra emotional. She was sick. That much she was right about. We're going to do everything we can to try and figure out why. Now I need you to go back to your master. Tell him what you know. Can you do this for me? Wiping the tears from her eyes, she nodded, saying, Yes, Master Vernestra. Padawan Jeki embraced her one last time, and then went back to her master. Vernestra paced, almost sprinted back to the Jedi Council chamber. Padawan Toril has taken her life in her chamber, she exclaimed as she stood in front of the rest of the masters. 2 suicides in a matter of days. This cannot be a coincidence. Master LaRue, the Ank's Jedi Master, replied. Were you able to identify some sort of reasonable cause of death? Asked Master Efru. The temple guards have taken her to the morgue for analysis. They should have something soon. But she did stab herself with her lightsaber. We must report this to Master Sol, Master Plo Koon added, grabbing the comms link that rested in the arm of his chair and reached out for Master Sol to re-enter his holoprojector chamber. A few moments later, Master Sol was standing before them. Master Vernestra stood instead of sat, as she said, Master Sol, a witness has informed us that Master Indara left for the outer rim planet of Weda in search of her presumed missing former Padawan, Jedi Knight Torben. Thank you for this, Master Vernestra. My Padawan and I will direct our course to Weda. We should have news in a couple of days. We will leave you to it then. May the Force be with you, Master Plo Koon finished as the holograms faded. Master Sol walked out of the chamber and to the protocol droids that were flying the ship, informing them of their new directions to the planet Weda. Just then, the chief medical droid approached Sol, saying, Master Sol, your presence is required in the medbay. Follow me. Master Kelnaka's body lay on the table with his head opened up as the droid takes Sol to the exposed head. It began, aside from physical defects such as cuts, bruises, and ripped out hair, Master Kelnaka was fine before his lightsaber incident. His primary issue came from this region. Please inspect his brain. Sol scanned the rest of his body as the droid talked, and when he came to his brain, he was almost taken aback by the ghastliness of it. A typical brain, no matter the species, has either a light gray or pinkish hue. Master Kelnaka's was entirely blackened. Not only this, but when the droid poked at it, it had solidified, forming almost a crust. I've never seen anything like this. What happened? Sol inquired. Unfortunately, sir, our databases are coming up short. We simply do not know what has happened. A medical droid that has the databases of over 100 worlds locked inside its data core is coming up with no answers. A great darkness has clouded my mind. Master Sol's thoughts took him back to Kofar. Thank you for informing me of this. Send this data back to the Jedi Council. Perhaps they will know what has happened. The droid obeyed the request as Sol made his way back into his chambers. Osha had been trying to meditate for the past 2 hours, but the horror of Master Kelnaka's suicide kept playing in her head. The pure terror on his face, his shaking body, and his howls of agony all put her in a sweat that blocked her mind from quieting itself. Every time she closed her eyes, the screams shot them wide open. Meditation was out of the question now, so she used her mind to pull her saber in front of her, floating it into the air. Even as a child, Osha loved to tinker. When it came time for her to build her saber as a youngling, she couldn't wait, pouring every ounce of herself into its creation. When she couldn't focus, she took it apart and rebuilt it. Now, she had her saber floating above her, all separated by pieces that she was inspecting. She had done this so many times that she no longer had to slot each piece back together by hand. She could mentally put it all back together. She reached out her hand, holding the kyber crystal that powered her blade. It pulsated with energy, a living entity that was expressed in the ignition sound and overall strength of the lightsaber. This gave her a sense of comfort, knowing that even the weapon of a Jedi worked in tandem with them. This had calmed her mind, but she was still missing something, and had the need to talk with someone. Mentally fitting every piece of her saber back together, she set it on her desk and opened her door to the main hallway. Sol's door was shut, but she still stood in front of it, leaning against it and peering through the small window. Master Sol was meditating. He looked at peace. Her master had seen some truly terrible things in his tenure as a Jedi, especially since the Council used him primarily for his tracking capabilities. Some of his hunts were so dangerous that Osha had to be left behind, under the supervision of Master Karth, who she was not fond of, to say the least. Every time she was left behind, she yearned to be back with Master Sol. But as Osha was getting closer to becoming a knight, she began joining her master on these missions. She now understood why she had been left behind so many times. She truly didn't know her master could possibly quiet his mind after everything. But he did, and effortlessly. But then the door slid open and Osha almost fell through. Having difficulties meditating, my Padawan? Sol knew that she was there 2 steps before she actually got to his door. Yes, master, my mind cannot quiet after the things that I have witnessed. He motioned for her to come in as she sat on the floor across from him. It is not a peaceful road that we travel, looking for the lost. Most of the time, the outcome is pain. The philosophies of the Jedi help in this regard. Lack of attachment makes it easier to cope. You will learn these things by the experiences you soon will have, just as I did. This answer didn't quite satisfy her, as lacking attachment was difficult for her. She supposed that appreciation and respect were one thing, and care another, but how could one not grow to care for those closest to them? Master Sol sensed her conflict. The path of a Jedi is not one many can bear. It is our responsibility to shoulder the protection of the galaxy from the darkness that seeks to envelop it. It is fraught with sadness, anguish, fear, and many other emotions that we must keep in check. There is peace in understanding that our sole purpose is to learn from the Force and help others find balance in their lives. There is no peace in letting your emotions consume you, but there is peace in letting the Force guide you. These principles have brought me from the edge time and time again. While the teachings and principles of our master were founded upon sound principles, it was getting increasingly more difficult to follow them to the letter. She cared about her master, cared about her friends. She couldn't detach herself from any of them, but she tried to focus on the Force and how it worked through and with her, and that gave her strength. I feel at peace now, Master Sol. Thank you for your wisdom. I'm always here when you need me, Osha. In fact, I'm glad that you are here, as I need to tell you that the Council has informed me that Master Indara left for the planet Weda, which is where we're heading now. Jedi are not particularly welcome in that corner of the Outer Rim, but we must show control if we are provoked. We are here to look for the lost, not start a fight. Do you understand? Yes, Master, I understand, Osha replied, her resolve coming back to her. Good, my Padawan. These things take time to develop. You will make a fine knight of the Order one day. Sol smiled as he put his hand on Osha's shoulder. These tender moments are what made Osha convicted in her path as a Jedi. Approaching the isolated planet of Weda, Master Sol took a deep breath in, quieting his mind, preparing for the hunt. Landing at the loading dock, a heavy haze had set in over the gloomy town. A few workers were moving cargo around the shipping yard as they stepped out of their cruiser. Osha could feel their stares as they made their way through the hazy town. Trash rolled around the streets and the beggars lined the walls of the buildings. Osha was uncomfortable, so she stayed very close to her master. He then stopped, looking at a footprint left in the ground. Look at this print in the ground. It's a Jedi boot, only soul of its kind. Master Indara was here. We must keep our eyes peeled. Sol scouted ahead. A couple thugs spotted them and stood in their way. The Jedi's hound. I've heard of ya. You aren't welcome here. You better turn around or there'll be trouble. A couple of the thugs spat on the ground next to him. We seek no trouble, only those that have been lost. Once we find them, we will leave. Sol's cool response did little to dissuade them. Nah, I think you'll leave now, said one of them, holding a spiked metal bat in both hands. No, I do not think we will leave now, and you will let us on our way, Sol calmly said, holding out his hand to his side. Yeah, I think we will leave you alone. Their demeanor was completely opposite as they separated, making a path for the two Jedi. See, my Padawan, there is no need for violence in every situation. Bear this in mind. The two continued to walk slowly down the path until it led them to a cantina that seemed to be the center of the town. All kinds of thieves and criminals gathered here. Osha spotted criminals that had just escaped out of Jedi reach, but this was not their mission and would have to be left for another time. As they approached the cantina, the metal doors slid open. There was general chatter. Some thugs were playing a game of sabacc, while others were betting on the outcome. Most of them were just drinking their worries away. At least, that's what it seemed like as they were chugging pints like no tomorrow. But as the Jedi walked to the bar, they were once again watched by everyone. This barkeeper, a Selkath woman, was serving a couple Weequay mercs some drinks as the two approached her. The same routine ensued. Master Sol held a holoprojector above the countertop. This time a picture of Indara was projected, and asked if she had seen her. This barkeeper wasn't going to lose her head like the last one did and pointed at the taped-off door frame. Last Jedi that came through here went in there. Not sure where she is now. The Selkath was timid. Osha could hear her heart beating rapidly. Master Sol bowed his head to her as they made their way to the door, gently peeling back the tape that blocked it off. The pit in Sol's stomach grew, and Osha could see it on his face. Master, is everything okay? You look pale. Osha's observation of him took him off guard. I feel a great darkness here. Come now, we must push forward. And so they did, venturing into the dark steel and rock-infused hallway. Osha was now sensing this darkness, which made the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Reaching the end of the hallway had turned the scene from tense to horrifying. Two bodies lay on the ground on opposite ends of the room. Lying in a pool of blood in a cell was Knight Torben, which, when Osha saw him, cried out and ran to his body. On the opposite end was Indara, whose corpse had also bled out. A sadness poured over Sol, mixing with the growing darkness he could sense, even feel. Whatever the cause of this darkness, it had overtaken these two Jedi, one of which was among some of the most powerful he had ever known. Before he got to her body, he bent down to pick up her lightsaber that was a couple feet from her. Aside from some very obvious wear, it looked to be in relatively good shape, though it had a bit of a rattle when he moved it around. Upon pressing the activation switch, the lightsaber sparked, but no blade shot out of the emitter. Hitting the hilt against the palm of his hand a couple times, he tried activating it again, but the same result occurred. Osha, I need you to take a look at Master Andara's saber. It's not emitting a blade. Sol held out the saber to Osha, who took it with piqued curiosity. Observing the outer casing of the hilt took her to the same result as Sol, concluding that there were no exterior defects that would render the saber useless. Then she attempted to activate it, and the same thing happened. Taking apart as many sabers as she did, she opened up Master Andara's with ease, finding the issue right away. Her kyber crystal that normally pulsated green with life and energy had retracted back into a murky white crystal without pulse. Master, her kyber crystal, it has no pulse. It's like it's been drained. I don't know how. Neither of them had ever heard of a kyber crystal's life being drained. And then there was the fatal stab wound in Indara's chest and the slice across the neck of Torben. Upon touching the impact spot, the room turned gray as the echoes briefly fought, before a blade of some kind was thrust through Master Indara's chest. The echoes then faded to dust. Vibro swords were outlawed hundreds of years prior, but those could never shut a lightsaber down. And the stab wound was far too small for a typical vibro blade, but too impactful for a vibro dagger. Nothing conventional did this, which was the point. Osha came back to Knight Torben, who had been slaughtered like an animal. A fire burned hot inside her, rage that bubbled within. Not only had they lost Master Kelnaka, but now these two, now Torben, her friend. She felt responsibility for this death, unfounded as everyone would tell her that was. Come now, Osha. We must take their bodies back to the ship and report our findings to the council. Wrapping both of their bodies within their robes, they took them out of the cell and back into the cantina, where they were met with a whole gang of thugs. Last Jedi that came through here tore this place apart, though looks like they got what they deserved. The whole group laughed at this saying. Then he continued, "This is our territory, and no one, Jedi or otherwise, gets to come through here and do what they please." The crowd around him began to chant and cheer as they frothed at the mouth for some action. But before any of them had the chance, a blast of force so powerful it almost ripped the building in half was hurled at them, sending them all flying several feet into the air and crashing down. Sol's head quickly turned to see Osha, with both hands out and Torben's wrapped body on the ground. There was no peaceful solution to be had with these monsters. I resolved the issue without bloodshed. Let's be on our way. Osha said all of this without even looking to Sol, but without a word, Sol began walking with her to the ship, knowing that everyone needed to grieve in their own way, even a Jedi. In the middle of the night, Master Vernestra was awoken in her quarters by two Jedi temple guards. "Forgive us, Master Vernestra, but the rest of the council is waiting for you in the morgue. There is something you need to see." Wiping her eyes, she answered that she would be there momentarily. Dressing back into the ceremonial robes of a Jedi Master, Vernestra followed the two guards that had stood at the entrance to her quarters. Once they arrived, the council were all waiting outside the door. The two guards then led Vernestra, coming to the door and stopping before it. The morticians waited several days before relaying their findings to try and uncover the reasoning for what you are about to see, but in all their searching, they found no answer. Please follow us. The wide doors to the morgue were swung open as the members of the Jedi Council all poured into the chamber. Padawan Toril was lying on a sterile table. A robe covered her body. They were directed to the head. It had been opened up, and what they saw was her brain, jet black and solid, like stone. The planet Olega, like most planets, was almost entirely covered in ocean, and yet the idyllic mountains were home to some of the most striking towns in the galaxy. The lush greenery and tranquil views made this an ideal location for the rich to live in solitude. The main town that provided the majority of the planet's value overlooked the ocean in spectacular fashion. The streets bustled with life, and in the center of it all, a pristine, newly built Jedi temple. Padawans, knights, and masters alike from across the galaxy all vied for coveted positions in this temple. The peaceful life, mesmerizing views, and amazing food were all any Jedi could ever ask for. Master Joram Ali was one of these lucky ones to enter and to teach at this temple. Her reasoning went beyond the tranquility, which was a plus, but mainly because deep under the mountains that most of the planet called home, there were dangers lurking in the shadows. Master Jorah was hardly one to sit for very long and sought to plunder the darkness below. But she realized that her responsibilities as a master came before her lifelong desire for adventure, and so she would help those under her watch, teaching them to find their strength in the Force. Being a planet so far removed from frequently traveled areas meant that security was minimal. The Force had taught the Acolyte many abilities the Jedi would deem corrupt. Her most useful of those skills was Force suppression, a powerful yet very subtle mind trick that allowed the Jedi around her to be completely unaware of her attunement to the Force. And so, under one of her many guises, this time choosing the name Cass to conceal her own, she made her way to the local inn, paying her 50 Republic credits to the innkeeper, and lugged her equipment upstairs to her quaint room. The Jedi Temple was in grand view outside the window to her room. Kneeling down, she meditated once more. "I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me," she muttered under her breath. At least she made something of herself. Why can't you be like her? Why are you worthless? The demons haunted her during most of her hours of meditation. "My child, your next trial awaits you. Use what you have learned from me and do not fail." The voice deep in her head returned, with its stern directive. "Divine Force, I am prepared for the trial ahead of me. Your hatred of this Jedi will guide you on your righteous path. Accomplish your mission, and I will make you the most powerful Force user the galaxy has ever seen. Fail me, and I will ensure your destruction." "I will not fail you, Divine Force." She was determined to take everything away from those who had stolen from her. A cloaked hand reached from the shadows, taking her by the hand and standing her up straight. "The time has come. My will is to be fulfilled tonight. Go and do your part," the voice commanded as she was returned back to her body, awaking to see the room covered in darkness. She had been in meditation for hours as night had fallen. The sea shimmered with the reflected light of the moon. "My rage will make me free," she muttered under her breath. Assuming her stolen Jedi robes from a previous victim, attaching a couple small vials to her belt and sticking the blade deep in her robes, she snuck out the back of the inn, appearing to be a regular Jedi out on patrol. Partially lifting the veil of Force suppression back so as not to blow her disguise, she made her way to the fully lit up Jedi Temple, the crown jewel of Olega. Before reaching the energy field that acted as the gate, she threw her hood up. Camera eyes were everywhere. At the gate stood a Jedi Temple guard, with lightsaber pike at his side. She bowed to him as she tried to walk past, but he put out his pike to stop her. "There's no entering the temple without identifying yourself," he commanded. "Forgive me, Lord Guard. I'm Knight Cass, sent here from the Jedi Temple in Coruscant to aid Master Molly. I should be in your transfer records." Raising his gauntlet to his helmet, it flashed with lights as he pulled up the record. Standing at his side, so as to see the records for herself, she shrouded his other arm behind her robe and quickly latched onto his skin underneath. "Your body and mind are vessels for my use. Let me in at once," she whispered intensely to the side of his helmet. His body began to quiver slightly as he bowed his head to her, deactivating the shield. "Where is Joram Ali?" she whispered the question to him. "At this time of night, she should be in the restricted masters section, in their private training area." Bowing herself to her slave, she walked into the temple as the gate reactivated behind her. It was far humbler than the one on Coruscant, at least if the holo pictures are to be believed. Stepping foot in one of the Jedi's monuments to their own greatness made her sick, but it was a necessary evil. Those her own age, poisoned by the Jedi's corruption, were gleefully walking the stone halls. Considering that it was the evening, the halls were relatively empty compared to how they were during the hustle and bustle of the day. And so, making her way to the elevator, she looked around before hitting the button to take her to the restricted masters section. Her heart began to race, not with fear, but with anticipation. Breathing in and out, she reapplied her force suppression to render herself a ghost among the force sensitive. "You don't deserve to live," the voices persisted. As the door opened, she quickly slipped into the darkness as a couple masters walked toward the elevator, leaving her unnoticed. Sinking her way through the restricted archives and past council chambers, she made it to the training area where Jorah Mali was. The training hall was a giant simulation chamber, with her training tonight reenacting a pivotal battle during the Mandalorian Wars. Aside from the Sith, the Mandalorians proved to be one of the greatest threats to the galaxy at that time. Perhaps she would have not lost everything had Mandalore succeeded in its quest. But it was time to right wrongs, and equipping her blade, she sliced the door switch, locking them in. She then threw a dagger into the console that programmed the simulation, deactivating it, leaving the entire room in darkness, save the blue glow of her saber. "Who disrupts a Jedi Master in training? Reveal yourself and face judgment," Jorah yelled, clearly a bit out of breath from the training. "And waste time on a worthless life form? I thought you were above dealing with the trash," the Acolyte called out from the darkness. "Who are you?" Her force sense wasn't picking up anyone, which was alarming her. "A pathetic life form you left for dead. Of course you wouldn't remember, so there's no use in idle talk. Show me how a master fights for their life," she yelled as she flung herself into the air, sending the tip of the blade hurtling straight for Jorah's head. But the master could sense the impending danger and held both hands to the sides, causing a powerful blast of force to usher out, knocking the Acolyte back into the air to land on the ground. Throwing a few daggers in her direction, Jorah slashed them down with ease, but was unprepared for the bolt of lightning that would hurtle her way. Due to the immense light that emitted from the bolt, Jorah caught a quick glimpse of her assailant, a human Jedi, no older than a typical knight. The lightning cast her to the ground as she shook violently from the bolts that were shooting up and down her body. But she was able to force fling her lightsaber across the room, sending it spinning at the Acolyte, who had to stop using her lightning to block the attack. The spinning saber came flying back into Jorah's hands as she took to the offensive now, swinging at the Jedi with precision strikes, but unaware of the power of her blade. The lightsaber directly clashed with the blade, powering down the saber in the same fashion as Indara's. But instead of hesitating, she threw it to the side and relied on the Force to guide her. The Acolyte took the next few swings at her, all of which were completely silent and ended up cutting her badly a few times. After a few more swings, Jorah was able to grab her wrist, ripping the blade out of her hand and kicking her hard in the stomach. Her fingers gliding along the blade, she attempted to study it, but could find no discernible marks to indicate what it was. Pulling out her daggers, the Acolyte swung at Jorah, who was now using her own weapon against her. It was an uphill battle, but the Acolyte was able to kick the blade out of Jorah's hands, leaving them dueling with their fists. Even though the room was dark, the Force allowed both duelists the ability to predict each other's moves and positions. Jedis very rarely fought with only their bare fists, but Jorah had taken it upon herself to become a proficient fighter without and with her saber for occasions such as this. Both combatants were extremely skilled hand-to-hand duelists, but the Acolyte had one more trick up her sleeve. Upon the next block and pushback from Jorah, the Acolyte took a step back, readying her fist for a straight punch, and lunged at her. Her fist was caught effortlessly, but a pain like no other shot throughout Jorah's body like a laser out of a blaster, a prick from a needle of some kind. Jorah fell back, holding her hand that oozed blood from the hole left in the middle of her palm. She began sweating profusely, feeling her veins all throughout her body burn hot, almost like they were being forcefully expanded. Though she could not see it, her skin was becoming ashen. It was as though her body had just started completely shutting down. The Acolyte took the vial that she had stored from between her fingers and stashed it back into her belt. From where I'm standing, you're the pathetic life form now. Look at you, desperately clutching for air as your body clings to life. How does it feel to be hopeless? Jorah mustered every last bit of strength that she had to try to respond, but her mind had begun shutting down and could no longer speak. I could end your suffering now. One slice of the blade and it would be over for you. But that's too simple. I've suffered for 16 years. You can manage suffering for the next few minutes of your life. And so she did, clutching for life in the blackness of that hollow training chamber. Her attacker was long gone before she sucked down her last breath. The protocol droids that flew the cruiser met Sol and Osha at the opening of the shuttle door and took the bodies from them. Osha instructed an R2 unit to get them outside the planet's atmosphere. Hearkening to the command, the droid got to work getting the ship airborne. Master Sol went to the hollow projector chamber, opening a communication line with the Jedi Council. We bring back more terrible news. Both Master Indara and Knight Torben were found here on Weda, but they have been slain. The murder of a council member is grounds for execution, exclaimed Master Ephru, ever the one to demand righteous judgment. Agreed, but a galaxy-wide manhunt must be done orderly, or we risk acting out of emotion rather than knowledge. On this front, we have more information to provide you that will aid your search for the killer, Master Plo Koon added. I'm all ears, Sol responded. Master Vernestra picked up the conversation, explaining, Our witness was Padawan Jeki Lon, Master Greatstorm's pupil. She informed us that another Padawan, Toril, held privy information regarding the whereabouts of Knight Torben that she shared only with Master Indara. Padawan Toril is deceased, a self-inflicted wound. Our morticians examined the body, finding the cause of her issue, but lacking any sort of explanation. Her brain had solidified, mutating into a shade of jet black. Have you any thoughts regarding this? What I have is another piece to the puzzle. Master Kelnaka's brain had corrupted in the identical way. We can link the deaths of this Padawan and Master Kelnaka together. I will continue to research this, but I do have a request. Say on, Master Jedi, Master Yoda replied. He continued, Master Indara was not slain by a lightsaber, but by a blade. And not only a blade, but one that has the ability to drain the life out of a kyber crystal. Any information that can be dug up regarding a weapon of this ability would go a long way in aiding us. I will take up this task, Master Vernestra responded, standing out of her chair and ready to walk away when Master Yariel stopped all of them. There has been another murder. Master Jorah Mali has been slain at the Jedi Temple in Olega. Osha and I will make our way there. May the Force be with you all, and the Force with you, Master Sol. Master Yariel spoke as the holograms shut down. Master Vernestra took her leave, making her way out of the council chamber room, down the elevator, where she was met by Master Greatstorm and Padawan Jeki. Master Greatstorm, Padawan Jeki, what can I do for you? She asked. My student has requested to join you in your search for answers regarding the death of Padawan Toril. Master Vernestra, I want to help you find the one responsible for her death. I even have some evidence here that I need to share with you. Jedis have died. What I'm looking into is dangerous. Too dangerous for a Padawan. I appreciate your help, and I'll take a look at your evidence, but I must do this on my own. Padawan Jeki interjected, but Osha is out there right now with Master Sol. I can handle myself. Master Greatstorm can testify to this. With Padawan Jeki looking to him, he replied, I have trained her myself. She can hold her own. She is very adamant about joining you. This flame should not be stifled, and you could use all the help you can get, it seems. Hesitating for a moment, Vernestra responded, Let's see your evidence first. Padawan Jeki explained, I know I wasn't supposed to go into Padawan Toral's chambers, but I wanted to see if I could find any reasoning for what happened. I didn't find that out, but what I did find was this. Handing over a holopad, Master Vernestra studied it carefully. It detailed a secret correspondence between her and Knight Torben, a rendezvous to the planet Wakiv, where Knight Torben had been stationed. He wrote about how much he missed her since becoming a knight the year prior, and that she could get away for just a few days. He went on to talk about the lush grasslands and perfect weather, that she would love it out there, and without a Jedi temple, there would be nobody to bother them. She continued, I can confirm that Toral really did leave. I didn't know where she was going at the time, and I tried to stop her for fear of her getting in trouble. Something happened to them out there. This is troubling, but valuable. Thank you, Jeki. Master Greatstorm could sense the impulsiveness and see it in Vernestra's eyes, and added, I'll bring this to the council. Jeki, you go with Master Vernestra. Use wisdom and patience, my Padawan. Thank you. Jeki, I was heading to the archives. I could use your help. Jeki flashed a quick smile at her master, who returned it, but motioned with his head for her to go. Stepping into the council chambers, he approached the seated masters who were deep in conversation. Masters of the council, I have records of a correspondence between Padawan Toral and Knight Torben. They planned to meet in secret on the planet Mokiv mere days before news of Torben's abducting. And what was the meaning of this meeting? Master LaRue asked. Infatuation, Master Greatstorm bluntly answered. Infatuation is not the Jedi way. These emotions lead to paths of darkness, Master LaRue exclaimed. Forgive me, but have you no respect for the dead? They may not have been shining examples of Jedi philosophies, but they were young. Did we not all make foolish decisions when we were youthful? Anyway, I am here as a messenger and no more. I have presented the facts and will now be taking my leave. Master Plo Koon spoke up, and we thank you for sharing this piece of information with us. With no Jedi presence there, we must tread carefully, as there may be threats there that we are unaware of. Olega, much in the same way that Weta once was typically a peaceful planet, outside of a few incidences of visitors falling off the mountains or encountering a strange creature far from where anyone ought to be. It was safe, tranquil, a perfect location for Jedi both youthful and experienced to study and become one with the Force. But tainted with the shed blood of another master, Olega felt enshrouded in a darkness it might not ever escape from. A darkness Osha had felt back on Weta. The couple-day flight between planets had been a relatively silent one for her. She had always thought of herself as being fairly level-headed, but something seemed to snap inside her when she saw Torben's body. Osha had no recollection of what her life before the Jedi Order was, considering she was only a child when she was brought in, and so had no attachments. But an emptiness always resided deep in her, and seeing one of her friends taken from her caused that emptiness to manifest into rage. The thought of her rage overcoming her frightened her, yet she felt too vulnerable to admit these feelings to her master. So she took every precaution to ensure clarity of mind, from meditation to working on her saber. Holding her kyber crystal in her hands only further made her question what had taken the life out of Master Indara's crystal. Her meditations took her to a place she felt most at peace, a balcony on the far east side of the temple that overlooked Coruscant's bustling metropolis atmosphere. From time to time, she wanted to disguise herself and descend to the lower levels to see what life was like for everyone else in the galaxy. But her fear of getting herself lost and never returning always made her snap out of this silly desire. The sun lightly cresting on her face, she felt a sense of oneness with nature that only one attuned to the Force could really understand. These thoughts of serenity greatly helped to ease her mind from the horrors that she had witnessed this week. But these horrors all came back to reality once they stepped towards the Jedi Temple on Olega. She was glad to be the Padawan in this situation, so she could remain relatively quiet. A couple of Jedi stood by the entrance of the now vacant temple. Master Utma, the head Jedi of this temple, greeted them. "Ah, you must be Master Sol and his Padawan Osha, sent from the High Council on Coruscant. We've been expecting your arrival." Both of them bowed, and then Master Sol spoke. "Indeed we are. Please tell us what has happened here." Master Utma began to explain. 2 nights ago, our temple was infiltrated by an assassin disguised as a Jedi, who said that they were transferring from the temple on Coruscant. This is what we were able to pick up from the security camera placed out in that front corner over there. Handing a tablet over, Sol watched it as he continued. The culprit in question said that her name was Knight Cass, though we have scoured the records and no Cass from the Coruscant temple exists. We were also unable to match her to any database, as she obscured her face with a hood. As you can see, Temple Guard Orox looked through the records too, but then she whispers something in his ear, and he lets her go through. About an hour later, the assassin walks out the same way she came in, through the gate that he opened back up for her. Sol then asked, "And where is Temple Guard Orox now? I'd like to ask him a couple questions." Briefly looking at each other with sullen faces, the Jedi next to him, Master Atano, answered, "Come with me." He directed them to the side alley next to the temple, where a pool of dried blood had been left. Shortly after the assassin left the temple, Orox stumbled into this alley, where he impaled himself on his pike. At first, we suspected this to be bribery or some other treason, but the autopsy report showed a rather unusual corruption of his brain. No other marks were left on his body, save for the hole in his chest cavity. Rewatching the tape a couple times allowed Sol to connect some of the dots of this case. He spoke up. "We have had 2 of the exact same cases, with victims having their brains corrupted. This appears to be a very ancient, very dark subset of what we know as a mind trick, where one's mind is not only tricked, but corrupted, turning their victim into a hapless slave. I have only ever read of this ability in the Jedi archives. Never have I seen it in person, as it is strictly forbidden, for obvious reasons. But now I have no doubt in my mind that this is what's being used on our victims." "Are you suggesting that we're dealing with a Sith here?" Master Utma questioned, lowering his voice. "I am merely suggesting that our assassin has studied the dark side of the Force. This does not make them a Sith, but it does make them incredibly dangerous. What worries me even more is how no one could sense her, considering her attunement to the Force." Bringing the tablet back up, he rewatched the part where Orox informs her that Master Mali was in the training area. "Please take me to this training area." Taking the elevator up, they arrived at the restricted Jedi section, moving past the archives into the training area that had been holographically taped off, with some Jedi poking around the command console to try and repair it. "When the assassin arrived," began Master Atano, "she cut the door mechanism here, locking them in. Our security footage is indecipherable due to the sheer darkness of the room at the time. What we do know is that from the autopsy report, we were able to identify that she was poisoned, though our blood analysis is still ongoing. But please have a look around." Osha and her master investigated the room. Pieces of a dagger littered the room, as well as drops of blood. Sol knelt down, putting his finger to the dried blood as an echo revealed Master Jorah's hand that had been punctured, and it was dripping with a lot of blood. Then the blue hand of the echo grew black before the scene disappeared. "She was poisoned with Synox. I can tell from the pattern of the poison as it ran up her hand and arm," Sol determined. "How are you able to see echoes in the Force? He can sense them. I need to see Master Jorah's lightsaber. Have you activated it at all?" No. Why does that matter?" asked Master Utma. It matters. Bring it to me. Master Soul nodded in agreement, and so he sent for her lightsaber to be brought in. The worn silver and black hilt had no doubt seen plenty of use throughout Master Jorah's career. A Padawan gave it to Osha, who immediately tried igniting it. It sparked, but no blade came out. What's the issue with it? He asked once again. Using the force to delicately take it apart, Osha extracted out the kyber crystal, which was as lifeless as she knew it would be. This is a signature of our killer. They're brandishing a weapon that takes the life out of a kyber crystal, she explained. An assassin with a knowledge of the dark side and a weapon that can disable lightsabers. We must send the might of the Jedi Order after them, exclaimed Master Utma. No, if we don't do this carefully, they will disappear forever. We thank you for allowing us access to your temple, but we have what we need. Osha, we must depart. I know where we're going. Padawan Jeki was having a hard time keeping up with Master Vernestra, who was practically pacing towards the archives room of the temple. Upon reaching it, they were greeted by the chief librarian, Rastelli Quist. Master Vernestra, what brings you to the archives? Master Rastelli bowed to her. Bowing back in response, she said, Master Rastelli, we are attempting to identify a particular weapon. We would like to start by looking at any information available on vibro weaponry. Ah, vibro weapons. Those will be in ancient texts, as the smithing of such a weapon has been outlawed for hundreds of years. Master Rastelli began walking towards the section that she was referring to as they followed behind her. Reaching the section, she pulled a few blue slabs of data off a tall shelf and put them under her arm as she went to plug them into the computer on the desk. These data slabs should contain the information that you're looking for. If not, come and find me. I'm happy to help. Thank you, Master Rastelli, Padawan Jeki answered for them as they bowed to her. Handing the tablet to her, Master Vernestra instructed, Jeki, I'm sorry for having you look at this image, but I need you to look for a weapon that matches this impact wound. Jeki took the tablet, seeing the gruesome imagery of Master Andara's corpse cut in the stomach by a thin wound. Gulping down her fear, she replied, Yes, Master. I know this isn't easy, but I appreciate your help. We'll get to the bottom of what's happening here. Master Vernestra reassured her. Jeki began scouring the data as Vernestra looked into the general construction of vibro weaponry. Based off Icani designs, these weapons utilized high-speed sonic vibrations to make the weapons deadlier, able to cut through both organic material and armor with ease. This information Vernestra had already known from her extensive studies as a Padawan. What struck out to her was a small detail that she had discovered after nearly an hour of research, which was specific construction that even fewer had seen. A vibro weapon made of a special material known as cortosis that was weaved into the metal of the blade. Digging deeper into this material, the description read that cortosis had a very high energy absorption rate and transmission coefficients. This gave it the capability to deflect lightsaber blows, but worse, the ability to short out lightsabers. This weapon didn't drain the kyber crystal, it overcharged it beyond its capacity, thus rendering it useless. Master Vernestra, there were a lot of vibro weapons, but I think I was able to identify the one used on Master Andara. It appears to be a vibro rapier, a long, thin blade that's completely silent. The cut matches the precision thrust this weapon excels at. Good, thank you, Jeki. I've learned some unsettling things about this weapon. The weave of it is special, made of a metal called cortosis, which deflects and shorts out sabers. Worst of all, one of 2 planets that some of the metal can be found is on Mokiv. Torben and Toril put themselves right in danger without even knowing it. We need to get there, see what really happened, Padawan Jeki exclaimed. I agree, but I need to inform the council of our departure. Ready yourself and be at the loading port in an hour. Yes, Master, she responded before they both went their separate ways. And then an hour passed. Vernestra and Jackie now departed for Mokiv, which was a 2 days' journey. Once they arrived, the planet truly was as beautiful as Knight Torben had described it to Padawan Toril. If there was anywhere else to put a Jedi temple, it would be here. But there was no time for marveling, and so they made their way into the small village that the landing port was surrounded by. They reached a cantina, the perfect place for picking up on the gossip of the town, as well as extracting much-needed information. Taking out their holoprojectors, they showed the Rhodian barkeep if they had seen either of them about 2 weeks ago. Her, I recognize. Checked out a room upstairs. Haven't seen her since. Room's still under her name, number 6. Got an extra key here if you want to check if she's there. Yes, thank you, Master Vernestra said, taking the key from her. Heading up the stairs, they located room 6 and opened it. Inside they found very little inside, just a couple pairs of civilian clothes. That is, until Jackie did a little bit of digging, finding a holoprojector and playing the recording. It was Torben, telling her that he had spent the day preparing a place for them. In order to find it, all she needed to do was look out her window and follow the path leading down to a field of grasslands overlooking a cliffside. Something was off about the recording, though, as he sounded almost like he was reading a script of some kind. On their guard, they followed the path, reaching the grasslands overlooking the cliffside. The path then led to the entrance of a cave, and as they reached the mouth of the cave, the hair on Jackie's neck stood up. I'm sensing something dark coming from this cave, she timidly said. I feel it too. Stay close to me. Master Vernestra motioned for her to come behind her. The lush green and gentle breeze of the outside had been stifled by heat and lacked any source of light as they descended into the cave. Igniting their sabers for light, the two made their way down until they reached what looked like a mini campsite. They found a small makeshift workbench equipped with tools made from the stone of the cave and a small clump of materials. Cortosis. It's the same as the images that I saw in the archives, Vernestra spoke. Then Jackie added, and then there's this, pointing to a spiked rock pillar that was covered in blood, along with a couple rotted teeth on the ground. The killer tortured him and lured Toril here, where they forged their dark weapon. Jackie was horrified and visibly upset. This couldn't have been random. He had to have been lured to this planet. Then the killer could escape with enough time to get to the Outer Rim as Toril made her way back to the temple to inform Master Indara of what had happened. But why go back to the temple and why take her own life afterwards? Asked Jackie, almost in frustration. The corrupted brains and the suicides, each a carefully planned piece of the puzzle to carry out the will of the one in control. This is far more than a mind trick. It's a mind enslavement. They follow their order, then once the command has been fulfilled, they end their life. Her order was to get Indara to Weda, Master Vernestra explained. Why target Indara? Jackie was having trouble following. The same reason Masters Jorah and Kelnaka were targeted. They were all on Brendok the day Osha was inducted into the Jedi Order, and the same night her sister May was killed in the Great Fire. No, she lives, plotting her revenge for 16 years and enacting it. Master Soul is all that remains. Jackie, Soul, and Osha are running into a trap. We have to warn them. The remote tropical planet of Scarif was a verdant, beautiful world, known especially for its relatively small size. The sandy beaches that outlined the peaceful village were tranquil and idyllic, and the ocean encompassing the planet was a deep shade of blue, filled to the brim with exotic life. The fauna was similarly exquisite, including rarities like the acacia nut palm trees and the giant Petalex sea grape. Osha had never heard of this planet before, but once they arrived, with the warm sun blanketing her face and the gentle breeze, she wasn't quick to leave. Once they stepped off the ship and began walking towards town, Master Soul explained, Synox is one of the deadliest poisons in the galaxy, with its rapid corruption of cells in the bloodstream. Worlds in this galaxy can be beautiful, but danger lurks in every corner. So we're looking for the ingredients that come in this Synox poison? Osha asked. No, my Padawan. The ingredients for this poison are found all over the planet. Look, over there, Jastin fungus is one of its key ingredients, and we've only just arrived. It's not the ingredients we're looking for, it's the one who takes from this world's beauty and seeks death. Long has Scarif been under the watchful eye of the Jedi for this very reason. There has yet to be a cause to interfere, but this might change soon. Bouncing between the small shops, they asked local vendors if they had seen any suspicious activity within the past several months. All of the answers came back the same. Nobody had seen anything or anyone that might have been causing a disturbance. Out of the corner of her eye, Osha was drawn to something. Someone, in fact. An individual in a novelty shop across the way was staring at her. Upon a closer inspection, it was a woman. Something stirred inside Osha, that deep emptiness that she had constantly struggled with. But why over a person she's never met? Because for whatever reason, something felt familiar, yet distant at the same time. Unable to explain it even to herself, she made her way to the shop, where she was greeted by an Ugnaught behind the counter. Welcome. Anything in particular catch your eye? Is there someone else working here today? She asked him. Before he could answer, a voice softly called out behind her. Osha, Osha, is that you? Turning around, she saw a woman who looked just like her. Confusion painting her face, she asked, Who are you? How do you know my name? It's May. Don't you recognize your own sister? May's face was a mix of happiness and sadness. I don't have a sister. Her words trailed off into the air as she began questioning everything. Yes, you do, Osha, May replied. The emptiness that Osha felt deep within her, a feeling she had struggled for 16 years to bury, was the memories of her sister trying to claw their way back. Without another word, Osha hugged May tight. Master Soul saw Osha from the window and walked in to retrieve her. Osha, come now, we must be... What? Upon seeing May, his heart dropped. He was speechless. She was alive. How could that be? Master, did you know I had a sister? Deep sadness had manifested behind those eyes as Osha looked to her master for answers. Yes, my Padawan, but we thought that she had died. Why don't I have any recollection of this? Why don't I know that I have a sister? Her questions were laced with venom. Osha, this is not the right time. I will explain later, he said, attempting to stabilize the situation. No, you're going to explain now. Her temper had boiled over the surface. Taking a deep breath, Soul looked into her eyes. It was for your own protection. You were struggling. I was trying to help you. You did it. Don't tell me it was you. I did what I felt was right. It helped you become the Jedi you are today. A tinge of regret washed over his face. After a moment of deafening silence between them, Osha responded, Just leave. I'm done helping you. Find them on your own. You don't need me anyway. I'm not your slave anymore. Osha, it's not like that. Your night terrors were so bad they would leave you unable to sleep. Your mind was scattered. You were in constant fear. You had no quality of living. So we gave you a life. I had a life that you took from me. I had a family that you hid from me. Leave now. I won't ask again, she demanded, drawing back her robe to reveal her lightsaber. You need time to cool down. I will be continuing our search. Come and find me when you're ready, Soul patiently spoke. He knew that one day he would have to explain everything to her, but that it would be at the right time. This timing couldn't have been any worse, but a weight had lifted off his shoulders. if only temporarily. Sol sauntered away as Osha looked back at May. I'm so sorry about everything. Please tell me about our childhood. I want to reacquaint myself with you. Please do not be sorry. It's the Jedi that should apologize to you. Well, that was quite tense. Why don't you two reacquaint yourselves? You can take your break early, May. Thank you, Mavan, May replied as they walked out of the store and into the warm breeze. Walking a path along the calm of the ocean around them, May asked, What part about our childhood do you want to know? Start from what you can remember, she replied. And so May began. Well, we grew up on a planet called Brendok, far out into the outer rim. The happiest days of my life were with you, playing out in the lush forest, climbing the bright yellow-leaved bunta trees, racing each other to see who could get to the other side first. The most amazing, colorful butterflies would fly around trees with blue flowers springing from them. We would spend all day exploring and playing together. We were inseparable. But it was when we would return home that the fantasy and excitement we experienced would be gone. Why? What happened when we went home? This and more, May said as she pulled back the collar of her shirt to reveal a large scar going across her right shoulder, then pulled the bottom of her shirt up to reveal burn marks along her ribs. Tears welled up in Osha's eyes as she asked, How did this happen to you? It happened to you, too. Your Jedi training and medicines probably allowed you to heal, unlike me. Our parents, they hurt us every night. Our only solace came from an old storybook that you kept under your bed, about a brave group of Jedi who saved a village from an evil monster that threatened them. You and I would dream about becoming Jedi, saving the galaxy from monsters like our parents. When we would go back to the forest, we would pretend to be Jedi, using the Force to push branches and rocks. But what we both soon discovered was that you actually had the Force. You could move objects with your mind. I guess it didn't take long for the Jedi to realize this and find you. Making their way down the cove to the beach, Osha asked, Sol, he was there, right? Yes, I believe so, but it's been so long, May responded, digging her shoes into the sand. So, what happened? Osha inquired further. One day, we were out in the forest as we normally were, when we heard our names echoing through the forest. It was our parents, who dragged us back home where the Jedi were waiting. They tested us using these devices that would have pictures, and without looking, we'd have to know what they were. Yes, I'm familiar with these. I have seen many younglings take this test of Force aptitude. But are you, or were you, Force sensitive? Sighing, May answered, no. And because of this, they left me behind and took you away from me. Osha put her arm over May's shoulder, consoling her. It was wrong for them to separate us, even if you don't have the Force. Come back with us, we can look after you. After they walked for a little longer, night began to fall. May said, It's getting late. Come, have some food at my place. It's just a short walk away. Stepping into her small place, Osha sat beside the open window that allowed the warm night breeze to refresh her. Handing her a glass of blue milk, she went into the kitchen, prepping some food for them. This is a peaceful place, perfect for a home. I wish I would have known, well, you. I would have visited often, Osha remarked as she admired the rest of the home. Yes, this place has served me well. Now, please enjoy, May said as she took a plate over to her, filled with a bed of herbs and a grilled blackfish on top. Thank you, sister, Osha said as she took a large bite of the perfectly cooked fish. Taking one bite, then the next, she was finishing her plate as she started to feel tired. Then she felt faint before everything became dark around her. Waking up hours later, she was chained to a wall behind rusted metal cell doors. Struggling and shaking, her body was too weak and her mind too clouded to free herself. Looking down, her robes were gone too. replaced by ragged clothes that roughly scratched her body. Then she saw May, deep in meditation, visibly shaking. She was wearing Osha's robes. "May, what is this? What's going on?" she frantically demanded, again trying to pull her restraints off. May reeled back, as if being shot out of her meditation. Facing Osha, she crawled towards her, peering at her through the cell doors. "Your Jedi left me to die on Brendok. They knew the pain we dealt with, and yet, because you showed more Force aptitude than me, they took you. Ever the hero Indara was to swoop in and save you, her precious child of the Force. But then when it came time to save me, she turned her back because I wasn't good enough. I was merely a pathetic life form in the eyes of Jorah, who told them that they shouldn't waste any more of their time with me. Your Master Sol and Kelnaka were spineless cowards who obeyed Indara and left me to my abuse. And finally, there's my beloved sister, who abandoned me to pursue our dreams of being heroes. Out of anyone in this galaxy, I thought you would be the last person to betray me. I'm sorry, May, but what you've become is deplorable. What I've become is a survivor. Once you left me, the abuse got worse as my aptitude in the Force grew. I unleashed all the fury that I had pent up for 8 years. Bolts of lightning shot from my fingertips that consumed them. It burned our home and everything we owned. But what did that matter to me? What did my own family ever do for me? Then the Force came to me when I needed it most. It spoke to me. It has instructed and guided me ever since. The Force, it doesn't speak to us, it exists around us. You're wrong. The Force speaks to me, and I am its vessel of vengeance. The Force has shown me how to exact my revenge. The Jedi are not perfect. I attest to that personally. But they seek balance and peace, yet you bring chaos. They bring light where you bring darkness. Look at the worlds and lives you've destroyed by your actions. You could have a chance at life, just come back with me. All I have is my vengeance. Everything else was taken from me. So I took everything away from those who stole from me. Balance, just as the Force requires it. Are you going to kill me too? Osha craned her neck in pain. Your master still breathes. My mission ends with him. I will not fail the divine force. Opening up the cage, the squirming Osha was trying to free herself as May wrapped her hands over Osha's face. Your mind will act as purgatory while you wait for me. Osha screamed in pain as her mind became corrupted and her eyes went dark. It should have been you that burned, the voices spat. Closing the gate, May fixed her hair like Osha's, put her vibro rapier in her cloak, and blew out the candle that provided the only source of dim light, leaving her alone in the dark. Stepping back into the fresh air, May scavenged around Osha's robes, finding her communicator. Master Sol, it's me. I'm sorry for how I acted before, but I am ready to come back to you. Nothing but static, and then, it is okay to feel anger, my Padawan, but to not let that consume you, this is what a true Jedi does. You have done well. I'm aboard our vessel. Come back to me. Master Sol was deep in meditation back aboard their ship. Reaching deeply out into the Force, he found a source of corruption, and tapping into that source led him to a scene. A woman kneeling to a figure cloaked in shadow. The figure held its arms in the air, like it was casting something toward her. Projecting himself closer, he saw the woman. It was May. He heard voices of anguish, vile remarks being sent towards May. Then the figure shot a piercing gaze at him. Eyes were red as the crimson of a bled kyber crystal. The figure held out his hand towards Sol, thrusting both him and May out of the mental projection. Snapping back to reality, Sol pondered the weight of this. May lived, which meant only one possibility existed. that she was the killer that they had been searching for. It all made sense, the specific targeting of the masters, all of those who were on Brendock that fateful day. Confronting her openly only would have led to Osha fighting with her sister against him. He had to let Osha fall into harm's way, which nearly tore him apart, but he required definitive proof before making any action against her. Now he had to rescue Osha, but what if that had been calculated, and his presence causes Osha's life to be taken from her? After much meditation and with some idea of a plan in his head, he stood to rescue his Padawan. That is, until a signal came from his holoprojector. Its location was somewhere in deep space. Clicking it on, he saw 2 Jedi stand before him. "Master Soul, this is Vernestra and Padawan Jeki. Do you read us?" "Vernestra, I read you." "Soul, it's a trap. The killer is May Anasea, Osha's twin sister. She's alive, and you're her last target." "I know, Master Vernestra. May is here on Scarif. She has Osha. She's in terrible danger, but I fear that if I go rescue her, her life may not be spared. Scarif is mere hours away from our location. Buy us some time. We will aid you." Master Soul stood proudly at the entrance to the ship, and as she stepped up, he led her up and into the common area. "I know that this has been a lot to take in, but realize that I had the best of intentions at heart. I never meant to hurt you," Master Soul said as he sat across the table from May, who had summoned her ability of force suppression to cloak herself. He gently grabbed her hand. "This has been a tough day, Master, but I am glad I got to see my sister one last time. I've been contemplating this decision since we parted ways, but perhaps there is a way for us to convince the Council of letting her come back with us once we've found our killer," Master Soul suggested. Gently pulling her hand away from his, she answered, "She's happy here, and I will visit her. There is no need to trouble her." "I thought you would want her to be back at the temple with you," Soul sounded puzzled. "She told me that she's happy here. We leave it at that." "Forgive me, Master, but I am not feeling well. I must retire back to my quarters." May stood up, smoothing out her robes. "Rest, my Padawan. We leave at first light," Soul answered softly, and with a bow left for his quarters. With the door closed behind him, he pulled the communicator out from his belt. "I have ascertained her location. She is in a cave on the far west of the island. Make haste," Soul whispered. Back in the bleak cave, Osha was fighting for her life. Her surroundings had faded into a smoke as she yelled for help, but no one answered. She was standing in front of a home, her home, as smoke started to pour out from the windows and front door. Suddenly, an eruption occurred, bathing the house in fire. The heat of it was irradiating so much that it started to feel like her skin was melting, and the smoke was thick, causing Osha to cough so terribly that blood was caking the ground in her palms. Horrifying screams were terrorizing the village, and all Osha could do was slump down, covering her ears and bawling. Then a burning hand grabbed her shoulder, and looking up, she saw 2 people, her parents, ablaze in front of her, yelling. Her fear was overwhelming her, and she pushed them back with so much force that the building behind them had been ripped out of the ground and sent crashing into the rest of the village, burning it all. Osha wailed as the home she didn't know was burning to rubble around her. The night sky became blood red, and the stars were falling through space. The screams were too much for her to bear, and so she ran into the ominous forest outside the village walls. A heavy mist began to pour in as she stopped by a fallen tree to catch her breath. All of a sudden, tree roots shot out of the ground, wrapping tight around her arms, legs, and neck. She was panicking, suffocating as she tried to free herself. Every time she resisted, the roots pulled harder. Osha tried to force push the roots away, but to no avail. She would succumb to the darkness around her, if not for a light, a purple one that flashed from the mist and the darkness to wrap around one of the roots, burning it in half. Then a whip cracked again, frying another root. A figure ran through the shadow and towards her, weapon in hand. Master Vernestra? What? How are you here? Osha cried out to her, still tangled by a few branches. Your master found us. We were merely guided by his instruction. You must come with us quickly, she instructed, whipping her lightsaber at the remaining roots as they singed and sparked. Standing upright, Osha asked, But how are you here? A projection through force transference. Since your mind hasn't succumbed to the darkness, there was a chance for this to work. Thank the force it did. Now take my hand. Let's leave this world behind. Reaching out her hand, Osha grabbed it as the forest and the mist cleared. Osha awoke on the ground, with Master Vernestra crouching beside her, with her hands on her head. Where is Master Soul? Osha cried, still in a panic from her mental purgatory. Padawan Jeki, who was standing behind Vernestra, answered, Aboard your ship with May. He has the situation under control for now, but we must hurry. Bringing Osha to her feet, Jeki returned her lightsaber to her. Soul, we've extracted Osha. You're free to engage. We're on our way. Aboard the ship, May had slipped away from Soul, who had entered his chambers. Sneaking over to the controls, she pulled out a dagger and reached into the maintenance hatch above the passenger's side, pulling out the electronics and inserting the dagger into one of the slots, cutting out the security override. Once that had been disabled, she pulled out her vibro rapier and dug it into the electronics, compromising the ship. I came back for you. I knew what we had done to you was wrong. I tried to save you. I'm trying to save you now. Come peacefully with us. Let Osha go. Give us the opportunity to give you a platform to explain your actions. Perhaps the Council will deal generously with you. Leaving me to die was the only generous thing the Jedi ever did for me. To be brainwashed like Osha would be far more torturous than anything I've endured. Last chance, May. Put the blade down. May was silent, holding her rapier's tip out towards him. Soul stood in a defensive position, igniting the blue blade that shot out from his hilt. Pushing Soul back with a powerful blast sent him careening towards the main area of the ship. May sprinted at him, thrusting the rapier right towards his chest, but he deflected this with his saber. Vernestra had explained the way her cortosis blade worked, how it needed direct force to overload the kyber crystal cocooned into the hilt of his saber. Protecting his kyber crystal, Soul slid the heated blade down the side of the cortosis blade, deflecting it without directly clashing with it. Each strike from her rapier was as deadly as it was quick. Whatever had trained her, she had become well versed in the art of armed combat. Soul hadn't fought like this in a long time, since the great hyperspace disaster had caused the Jedi to lead an assault against the Nihil. However, this did not mean that his skills had dulled. He was an even greater warrior than he was before, since he had honed his connection with the Force. This led him to create an impenetrable defense with his saber that May could hardly get through. But she wasn't without her tricks, sending her daggers hurtling through the air with a well-timed force push during one of her strikes with her rapier caused Soul to not see one of the daggers as they landed into his leg. Holding his hand out, he pushed at her using the strength of the Force, but she pushed back, causing an impasse of Force energy that knocked both of them to the ground. The three Jedi made it back to the ship, which had gone completely dark since Vernestra and Jeki were aboard. Then a flash of blue light sparked and deflected off the cortosis blade. After clicking the button without response, Osha pulled out her saber, slicing the supports that kept the doors shut as they slammed to the ground. The three of them ran up the loading entrance, all with lightsabers in hand. They found Master Soul engaged in combat with May, who was lunging at him with her vibro rapier. Vernestra's lightsaber whip cracked the rapier out of her hand. May was down 4-1, now an even fight in her eyes. Jeki ran at her, swinging her saber with quick precision, but May was able to avoid these strikes and kicked Jeki back. Soul then swung at her, but she sidestepped, pushing Soul into Jeki as the two fell back towards the hallway. Osha ran at May, anger struck across her face as she slashed at her. You're making a mistake, Osha, siding with those who have betrayed you. I would have saved you. You would have turned me into a slave. You're no family of mine." And with that, Osha kicked May back as she force-pulled her vibro rapier toward her. Her rapier was far nimbler than Osha's lightsaber as she quickly moved the vibro blade past the glowing blade and sliced Osha's leg with it. As she came down, Master Vernestra cracked her lightsaber whip at May, striking her across the arm with it, burning the robe and searing the flesh underneath, revealing the durasteel armor that she was concealing. Ripping the robes from her, she quickly looked at her armor, as it had been singed from the direct impact of the whip, and had even burned her skin. Vernestra pushed the attack, lunging in for another swing. May ducked the swing and lifted her leg up, and stomping down, crushed Vernestra's wrist as the lightsaber whip dropped from her broken hand. Whipping the lightsaber around her to create space between herself and her opponents, she cracked her whip at Sol, who was back in the fight with Jeki. Sol blocked the attack as Vernestra went to move behind Osha, but May directed the deflected blade back at Vernestra, wrapping the blade around her neck, decapitating her. Jeki screamed in anger as she jumped back in, hitting May with everything she had. The attack proved successful as Jeki was able to slice the whip in half and slice May across the chest, melting her chest plate in the process. Furious, May swung her blade in the air towards Jeki's head as she clashed with it, causing the saber to shut down. Thrusting her rapier towards Jeki's chest, her blade was pulled away by Sol as he force-pushed the Cortos' sword and sliced at her leg, which went deeper than the durasteel armor, taking a deep slice of her knee. More strikes were blocked and parried by May until she sent all of them flying backwards with a powerful force push. Jeki's broken saber flew through the air behind her as she fell to the ground. Sol and Osha remained on their feet but were dazed as sparks of light cracked around May's fingers before bolts of lightning shot from her fingertips. The bolts split into 3 branches that connected to the 3 Jedi that remained. Jeki was being electrocuted on the floor, while Sol and Osha were standing their ground, blocking the electricity as it morphed into energy that was being consumed by the blade. "Osha, when I say, push back with all your might against the lightning," Sol screamed over the chaos. Nodding, Osha planted her back foot, and when Sol gave the shout, she pushed back against the onslaught of lightning with all her might. The pushing of both their sabers back redirected the lightning back at May. The bolts flashed and sparked back towards her, not only electrocuting her, but sinking deep into her blade, causing it to overcharge and explode, taking off her hand. May screamed as she fell backwards to the ground, holding her bleeding out stump. Both Sol and Osha held the tips of their sabers to her. Jeki was able to get back to her feet as she saw the bloody carnage that had unfolded. May was writhing in pain as Sol stepped in close. "Surrender, May. You have been defeated." Screaming in anger, she shot out her hand to electrocute them once more, but Osha swiftly cut off her other hand. Lying in agony, Sol put his hands to her head, quieting her mind and putting her to rest. Putting his hand on Osha's shoulder, Sol said, "You've done well, my Padawan." But instead of relief and gratitude, Osha shrugged his hand off her shoulder, and picking up her sister, carried her into the med bay to be put in the Bacta tank. Jeki was crying over Master Vernestra's body as Sol stood over her. "I've lost many good friends these last couple weeks. I fear that we will all need much time to recover from the darkness that May has cast upon us all." Jeki hugged Sol as she wept into his robes. The courtyard outside the Jedi Temple had been filled by every last youngling, Padawan, knight, and master there was to honor the dead slain by May. The fires blazed deep into the night sky. Many were crying, most were holding back anger, such as Osha. She had been lied to by both the Jedi and her sister, all in the span of a few hours. She didn't know how to process her deep sorrow and anger. After the funeral services had ended, both Osha and Sol were summoned to the council chamber. Standing in front of the council, Master Plo Koon spoke. "Padawan Osha, you have requested an audience with the council. You may now speak." "Masters of the High Council, I stand before you broken. My mind is fragmented, and I feel disconnected with the Force. I have been backstabbed far too many times. I formally request to be removed from the Padawanship of Master Soul, relinquishing my position from the Jedi Order. I need time to heal, and I won't get that here. The members of the council looked at each other in deliberation until a final verdict was reached. Padawan Osha, a request such as this is traditionally declined, seeing as how you are still a Padawan learner with further training required. However, because the circumstances of this case are special and personal, we are allowing you 1 year to refocus yourself outside of a Jedi temple. This does not mean that you are exempt from acting as a Jedi, as any study outside of Jedi manuscripts and data is strictly forbidden. Going against this will result in permanent and immediate termination from the Jedi Academy, as well as a forbiddance to carry a lightsaber. Do you understand these stipulations as we have spoken them to you? Bowing to them, Osha replied, "Yes, Master. I understand these rules, and am grateful for your understanding in this special case. May the Force be with you all." After she said this, she looked to Sol, giving him a bow as she began walking away. "I will walk you out, Osha," Sol said as he followed close behind her. The ride down the elevator was somber. Arriving at the ground floor, Sol turned to her, saying, "I did what I felt was right. I wanted you to be free of your suffering. I wanted a better life for you. You may choose to turn your back on me, but I never meant to hurt you. I just can't trust you right now, Sol. I need time to heal, refocus myself. Don't let these ideas of refocusing yourself turn your heart away to the dark side. I've taught you far too much to let you descend into the same type of madness May has fallen into. Goodbye, Sol. May the Force be with you. I will be here when you are ready for me," was the last thing Sol would be able to say to Osha before she walked off into the darkness of the night. Sol returned to the council chamber, standing before them. Master Plo Koon spoke. "Master Sol, is there any further information that we should know at this time?" "Indeed, there is, though I did not want to burden Osha with this information, as she is already wearied from this all. You are free to speak to us, Master Sol," Master LaRue spoke. "Upon looking into May's mind," he started, "I saw something, someone in control. Osha confirmed to me that May believed that she was being instructed by the Force itself. I fear something far more sinister was behind this, planting the voices in her mind that Osha also spoke of and I heard myself. She had pure dark side energy radiating off of her. This figure is the one who thrust me out of May's mind and has been manipulating her." "And did you see this figure?" Master Efru asked. "Only for a moment, Master Efru, but I haven't forgotten. Their species was Bith. The head shape confirmed it. They had a metal suit and tubes going into a mouthpiece made of the same metal. After that, I saw no more." Master Yoda then clutched at his chest upon hearing this statement. The rest of the council looked at him in worry. "What do you sense, Master Yoda?" Master Sol asked. "A great darkness, I feel. Only the beginning, I fear." And that's the end of my story. I hope you enjoyed. Since you made it to the end of this very long video, I want to thank you so much for watching. And yes, I know the show has 8 episodes and mine is only 7, but I didn't want to have any filler, which is what the original show had a lot of, so I think I'm okay on that front. Every week of watching the subsequent episodes of The Acolyte just made me hate this show more and more. I feel like they pulled everyone in with this simple and cool premise, a murder mystery in the Star Wars universe set way before the prequels, but then just completely failed to deliver on any of the mystery or intrigue that goes along with this premise. and also making the Jedi feel like the bad guys and the witches feel like the good guys, or making May feel like the good guy. I hated all of it. So that's what I attempted to do in this rewrite, to actually make the Jedis the good guys, to make the Acolyte the bad guy, and to actually make it a murder mystery. So did I succeed at this venture, or did I fail? Well, let me know in the comments below. Also, if you liked what I wrote, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I'm trying to get back into the groove of making content again. Also, consider joining my Discord, Rewriters Roundtable, where you can talk about all things writing, gaming, or whatever with a like-minded community. There are some really great people on this server who will welcome you with open arms, and I'm thankful for that. And so with that, I'll end the video here. Thanks again for watching, and this is the Rewriter writing out.